Welcome to the smoke-filled room in this special in-person episode. We are in person with some special guests for a manufacturing-focused episode of the smoke-filled room. We're with our partners, the Technology Manufacturing Association, TMA, out of Sundberg, and they represent small and mid-sized manufacturers throughout all of Illinois. And we're here to talk manufacturing issues and things that, frankly, just even developing this agenda that I've learned from our manufacturers that I had no idea about. So you absolutely want to make sure you watch this whole episode. Our special guests this week are, we've got Zach Mottl. He is the president, CEO, and chairman, and a lot of other titles of Atlas Toolworks. You're also the chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, and you've held a bunch of roles with TMA as well.
That's right.
So you are all things manufacturing and business.
Very kind. Manufacturing guru and a champion for American-made anything.
Excellent. I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Collin.
We have Kurt Sundberg with us. Really glad to have you. You are the president of Simplex System Controls in Elmhurst. Also, you're the vice chairman of TMA's Government Relations Committee. So really happy to have you joining us this week as well.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. We also have Rich, who's just that guy, Rich. No, Rich is core strategies, government affairs expert, and does a lot of work in the government affairs space. So obviously we needed to make sure we had him with us this week. Thanks, Rich, for being here.
Great to be here, Collin. Excited to talk about manufacturing.
We have one more guest joining us about halfway through the episode, so I will wait to introduce him until we get to that point. In the meantime, we're going to get right into our agenda. I got to ask, our two expert manufacturers, and we'll start with you, Zach, how important is manufacturing to our economy, especially in a state like Illinois? People don't understand just how important this industry is. It's really the driver of our economy, isn't it?
It is. Illinois, any state, any nation, you can't have a healthy, secure, prosperous nation, state, locale without manufacturing, right? It's at the base of everything. And when we talk about some of the things that have gone, south in America, the deaths of despair, the fentanyl problems, when you look at where those are worst, it's in places that lost their manufacturing base. It is the number one ladder for upward mobility for people of all backgrounds and all types. It's a great driver of wealth and a great driver of national security. There's no country in the history of the world that went from poor to rich without manufacturing.
Well, Kurt, what do you see? How important is what you do and what the manufacturing industry does for this state's economy?
I agree 100% with Zach. What's interesting from my background, I spent 24 years in corporate America. I had nothing to do with manufacturing, didn't know how important it was. I was just in the ivory tower, right? End up buying my father-in-law's company. I am now a major supporter of manufacturing, the importance of it, like Zach said, to our economy. Both for jobs, it's just, we forgot a whole part of America at one point saying that we weren't going to manufacture. There's so many people that want to work with their hands. That's their passion, and they're good at it. I call the guys at our plants artists because of the work they do.
Well, and it's amazing when you look at the stats. You look at just manufacturers and the jobs they provide. 650,000 jobs in the state, and we have roughly half of the 10 biggest manufacturing zip codes in the whole country are here in Illinois. No one realizes just how massive manufacturing is for this state's economy. Rich, I know it's eye-opening when you talk to legislators about just how important this is, because most of these legislators have never stepped foot in a plant, let alone knew they existed.
No, and it's something that we've been really focusing on is trying to get legislators out to visit manufacturers at their plants to really see. And we've done this many times, and you can't believe how many times they walk into that and their eyes just open.
That's
and
right.
They go, oh my gosh, I had no idea this existed here in the district I represent. But the numbers are really staggering, Collin. I mean, 10% of the entire workforce in Illinois is direct manufacturing, and they support 30% of all workers in Illinois. $580 billion economic impact to the state. It's just staggering when you think about the impact manufacturing has.
Well, and I will fall under this trap just for a second, but it's also just sometimes just really cool. Like the things that are produced by some of you guys. I hear stories about like some of the defense work and aerospace work, and it's just, you guys are doing things that are high level manufacturing that couldn't be done anywhere else in the world. And so just, it's probably not the most official term to use, but it's just also sometimes really dang cool.
It is really cool. It is really cool. The things we make and the innovation that comes out of manufacturing, and people want to talk about high tech all the time and worry about, computer chips and all this kind of stuff, but paper clips are important too, right? There's innovation that goes into it, and you probably know about this, the machines that make simple things like paper clips and bottles, they're complicated, right? And there's innovation, there's patents, there's inventions that come out of that. So we can't get all starry-eyed about, only the high-end stuff. It's all important. It's all good jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that leads into the next question, which is, as you guys look at the economy, over the last 12 to 18 months, no matter who you talk to, they have an opinion on we're headed towards a recession, or everything's great, or you guys are on the ground. You're actually, doing this. What do you see? And Kurt, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. What is your feelings on the economy as we move forward in the next, let's say, 12 months?
I'm very optimistic as what's going on, and I attribute it to a lot of the work that the CPA, which Zach's chairman of, and that we've been a member of, have been talking about for years. If you look at what's driving our business, Zach and I were talking about a little bit about this. We build custom industrial electric and pneumatic control panels. The bulk of our work right now in-house is green related, storing solar energy into batteries. It's also for brand new plants that are being built in the United States. So one of the things I was saying is that it may not be necessarily be U.S. companies that are building plants. I'd love it if they were, but we have other companies, foreign companies that are now building plants in the U.S. And that's what we're building control panels for. So, yes, I'd love it if it was a U.S. company. But secondly, I'll take it if it's bringing great jobs, right, for people that need jobs, and it's going to drive our economy. So that's what's driving us. So if you look at the Infrastructure Act and you look at some of the manufacturing that's coming back, it's not all going to come back, but the amount that's coming back is driving our business.
Huh, interesting. What do you see?
Yeah, actually a similar thing. About 50% of my business is now defense and aerospace. So it's rockets, it's all the Space Coast. You're hearing about what SpaceX is doing, what people are doing. That's a very busy industry. Of course, the world has become somewhat of an unsettled, unsafe place. That's driving defense. So we're lucky to have the skills and the industrial base here to support that, our national security. And the other half of our business that's more tied to general industrial things and stuff like that, we're seeing a lot of business there too, a lot of growth. So like Kurt said, it's about setting the table, right? We've done a lot of work on the national level with CPA to reform trade laws. And, I got to say, President Trump came in, was a big disruptor for those issues. He had the vision to talk about it and talk about the China problem and the issues of free trade. But really, the Biden administration has continued those things. It's bipartisan, right? The tariffs didn't go away. The support for domestic manufacturing. We're talking about industrial policy again as a nation. We were the only nation, we hadn't had an industrial plant since Alexander Hamilton, right? It's unbelievable. Germany has one, China has one, Japan has one, every other country does. South Korea, they have these plans. And, I'm a free market guy too, but at the same time, when everybody else is playing a different game and they're taking our lunch, we got to look and do it differently. So we're talking about industrial policy again and planning and about setting that playing field that attracts all those companies here. So I'm delighted to see that, and yeah, I'm very optimistic as well.
Yeah, if we can just get a level, fair playing field, we'll beat anybody.
Correct.
We really will. We've proven it time and time again. But you can't be working against companies that are being supported by their government. We can't compete there.
You can't compete against China Inc. You can't compete against South Korea as a country. No company can. I don't care who they are, big or small. But when we get behind it as America, we can do it.
Well, and we're going to definitely get into trade because that's going to be a big topic. Before we do, just briefly, I wanted to ask, you guys are both, your businesses are located in Illinois, and I'm sorry for that. So I want to ask, what is it that state and local policymakers, you just talked about at the federal level, bipartisanship has led the way to improve manufacturing. We don't see that in our home state. And so I guess for people who are on the ground, and Zach, maybe I'll start with you, what are the kinds of things that people who watch this maybe don't realize because they're not sitting in the jobs that you guys are, and they hear somebody like a Governor Pritzker, someone who might say, oh, it's all fine, everything's fine, that's just the cost of doing business. But the cost of doing business is 40 hours of your life trying to deal with some regulation that got dropped down here or something. What is it you could tell people to get them to understand why it's so tough to do business here?
It is. It's just a patchwork of regulations. One great example is, and I don't know if you're dealing with this if you're in Cook County, but the vacation and the holiday pay schedule. The city of Chicago has its own program right now that they've put into law. Cook County has its own program. The state of Illinois has a different program. They've changed it. And we want to have a competitive environment, attract workers. There's a skills skilled workforce shortage, so we're doing everything we can to attract people in, and we want to have a competitive vacation package, PTO package, but when you have a patchwork of different laws from different levels, it's just a nightmare. And we've changed the policy multiple times, and that adds cost, right? It's cost of compliance. So I think legislators have a well-intended idea, but we don't need more laws, we don't need more rules, we need good workers, we need a good pipeline of workers, and let the free market set that kind of stuff. So that's very frustrating. And then the costs in Illinois. I mean, gas tax, right? Everything else. There are so many things. Energy costs. We just watched Mike Madigan, and these trials are going on right now. Well, they jacked up our energy prices in Illinois, and I haven't seen anybody working to fix this. ComEd rigged the system and jacked up our costs. If my plant was in Missouri, I would enjoy phenomenally cheaper gasoline, phenomenally cheaper energy. These things are all putting Illinois at a disadvantage. And then you look at the kids coming out of schools in Illinois, and when you look at WirePoints is putting out some great information lately about these kids can't read. Pick whatever school district, there is a phenomenally high percentage of kids that are not prepared to work anywhere. So Illinois there's a lot of opportunity, and I feel like we're coasting on momentum, right? You talked about the breadth of manufacturing here. I love that, and we need to keep that. But if we don't change these other factors, it's going the wrong way.
Yeah. Tad, what Zach was saying is that, what do I like best about my business? It's interfacing with the customers. It's interfacing with my employees. It's really doing the work. You know how much time I'm spending trying to understand what's going on in the legislature? That's what really kills me. I look at my last couple of weeks. I'm trying to understand, like Zach said, underneath there's good intention. But it's really, they've got to involve us more so that we can talk about how can you do it without taking all of our time. Yeah. And that, I'm spending too much time trying to understand that. And then, God forbid, I make a mistake, and I misunderstand something, or I got to pay a lot of money to a lawyer to make sure I didn't miss something.
That's right. Well, we're going to talk about a few specific pieces of legislation when we've got our next guest towards the end of this episode. That there's some good ones, and there's some that are going to add yet another regulation that you're going to have to deal with. So it does just keep piling up and keep adding up. And when you don't have to deal with that in other states, it's what makes those other states sometimes appealing to businesses, and it's why they might look to move to another state. I know you were just working with the legislature in another state, and they rolled the red carpet out trying to beg you to come down
right.
there.
And they're writing their own bills, and they're drafting their own bills.
Yeah.
They know what they're voting on.
Yeah, it's amazing as we see it. So appreciate that insight from you guys. Rich, anything you hear from a lot of the businesses that you work with through CORE? I know you hear stories all the time about just the frustrations of dealing with whether it's local or state stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Zach was exactly right. There's two main issues. It's over-regulation and it's taxes, quite frankly. It's income taxes, it's property taxes.
So that just comes into an overall
gas
cost
taxes.
situation,
It's
right?
everything. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how many of those classifications Illinois is like number 1 or 2 in the nation as being the highest in.
Well, we talked a couple weeks ago about just the high energy costs in the state, and we mentioned that manufacturers pay a third of the energy costs in the state. So whenever this move to carbon neutral, carbon free, it all sounds great, and I think we could all agree that being more environmentally friendly is a great goal. But 1/3 of the cost of that is being borne by Zach and Kurt and our manufacturers. So but you guys weren't at the table when that was discussed. So it's just, hey, they'll pay for it. They're rich business owners. They'll pay for it.
Yeah, and it's the numbers are really crazy. I mean, a couple of years ago when they passed that legislation, the governor said he wanted Illinois to be carbon free by 2050, and he set targets all along the way. And I think electric-wise, by 2030, we're supposed to be 30%. This year, actually, 20% of our energy is supposed to be renewable for electricity, and we're like 8%. There's no way we're going to hit these numbers based on where we're going. And if we do, it's the costs are just going to go way, way
and it's
up.
already sent our energy bills through the roof, and we're not even anywhere near where we need to be. So that just it makes manufacturers who need not only good energy but reliable energy. You guys can't lose a shift because we got a brownout or something, and you've got really delicate, expensive equipment.
We've had many problems with surges, with issues. It's becoming increasingly unreliable on the grid.
And that was the one thing from energy that Illinois could say. We have one of the most reliable grids in the whole country, and that's been going down. So there are competitive advantages with our workforce, but we're rapidly eroding a lot of these advantages.
That's right.
All right, let's keep moving on. Another question I wanted to ask is specific to the types of manufacturers that you all are. So TMA, our partner for this event, they've built what's called the SAM Caucus, the Small and Mid-Sized Manufacturing Caucus down in Springfield, because TMA really represents this niche, this small to mid-sized mid-sized manufacturers. What people don't realize is there are manufacturing interests that are represented down in Springfield, but that's the big manufacturers. And many times they have different needs than what a small to mid-sized manufacturer might have. And so TMA's real big focus has been getting people's eyeballs and ears on the needs of the majority of the manufacturers in the state. And so that's really a question that I have for you guys is what unique needs do you guys have as a small to mid-sized manufacturer that maybe a lawmaker wouldn't even be aware of, because all they might hear of is the big manufacturing, not the 20 to 30 to 50 to even 100 people in the shop. Are there unique needs that you guys face as small to mid-sized manufacturers, and how do we get that in front of these lawmakers? What do you think? Because I know you've interacted with maybe some of the bigger ones. What's something unique that maybe you guys deal with that a larger one wouldn't deal with?
That's an interesting question, Collin, that I don't know, I've thought about it enough to answer that exactly. I like the way you put it, though. We do have unique challenges, and but what I'm going to say is, one of our big challenges is labor, right? It's just, but that's going to be a challenge for the big manufacturers.
But I think the
too.
thing we hear a lot is the resources available. When you need a lawyer to do something, or when you need to go recruit, you've got to go find some way to do that. Whereas a big business, these massive manufacturers, they probably got 7 staff members who are on staff to handle that. Whereas it's an extra cost.
That's a great point, Collin.
And isn't that one of the best things about TMA as a member? I mean, for me, the reason my company's been a TMA member since 1928, and we're there for the training. We're there for the workforce development. These bigger companies can build their in-house school, their in-house pipeline, their in-house training. We don't, so we count on TMA to build those kind of classes and help us build a pipeline of skilled workers and recruit them, pull them in, etc. Not to mention the lawyers and all the other.
Yeah, well, thanks for jogging my memory, because I used to work for 2 70,000 people companies before I came to a 35-person manufacturing company. So,
So you've lived both sides of it.
I've seen it. And what's really interesting is when we interface with those large companies too, and we're trying to do business with them, that what's interesting is my employees will look at me and goes, why are they having such a hard time answering a simple question? And it's like, well, let me tell you how this works, right? It's unbelievable what you'll see there. But to your point, Collin, it's like, I used to work for McDonald's Corporation. Everybody thinks of them as a food company. They were one of the largest law firms in the world. They were one of the largest real estate companies in the world. That type of thing. If you think about it.
And a school, right?
Right.
McDonald's, right? They train. Wow.
So every time, I can't tell you, one of the good things I got from that is I read a lot of contracts. I'm reading contracts every day. I actually deal with some of the larger companies that we do business for, and they can't believe that I read a contract. And I read the contract and I go, I'm not signing that. It says this. It does not. I go, yeah, it does. So I mean, but that's me. I have to do that. If I had to pay lawyers to do that, we would be really hurting. So you did hit that spot where, just to get lawyers or accountants or CFOs,
Health insurance, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, how many times do we hear it, Rich, down in Springfield, where a well-intentioned legislator puts something through and they say, oh, it's fine. They'll just have, their lawyer take care of it. It's like, no, these guys don't have a lawyer on full-time staff.
That's us.
That's
so
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Or they're going to have to go pay somebody. This is an extra burden of time and of money that these small to mid-sized businesses, these small to mid-sized manufacturers have to bear. But there just isn't that awareness down in Springfield.
We just had this discussion with a small manufacturer that we visited the other day with a legislator, and it was about the Paid Leave Act, but the state one. They're not in Cook County, fortunately, so they only have to deal with one of them. But even that one, this is a company that already goes well above and beyond what the PTO law says you need to do. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was all the paperwork they had to fill out and all the analysis they had to do to figure out what they had to do and how they need to report it. It took hours and hours and hours for them to do it. And they're a small manufacturing company. They had to hire an attorney. They had to get their accountant involved. And every time they do that, they're paying billable hours. I mean, they don't have these people on staff, like the big companies. So that's one of the main things that we hear from small and mid-sized manufacturers is that dealing with paperwork and regulations is so much more difficult for them than some of the larger companies.
Yeah. And what's the other alternative? Think about that, right? If you're not going to pay those rates and not do that, you're at risk, right? Because you're trying to do the best you can. You're trying to run a manufacturing company, yet you're trying to negotiate all this legalese, trying to understand it to see, can I can I maybe not have to pay a lawyer to do this? And that can really add up.
Well, and when the auditor comes in from the state, they don't care about your reasons. They've just been instructed to get whatever money they can. We were talking to a business owner very recently who was under an audit, and the person conducting the audit says, listen, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, but my supervisor said you've got a lot of money and I'm just supposed to get as much of it as I can. It's like, you probably weren't supposed to say that and admit that on the record, but that's what these instructions are, because you are those rich business owners who have just gobs of money flowing out of every hole. And
I just hate that fat cat mentality, right? But when you get down to it, most people are employed at small businesses. That's the thing. We are the job creators, and so there's this disconnect, between the image of the big business and the hardworking independent small businesses whose teammates are practically their family, right? They care and they treat them like family. So we can't paint all business with that broad brush, and that would be my request down in Springfield. Realize there is a big difference between those two things.
But I want to reiterate one of the points, and this is that you made, Zach, and I make this point when I give tours of our factory to students, is that we hire more people in the United States than big corporations.
Right on.
Right?
By far.
So you asked earlier, Collin, what's the importance of manufacturing? We hire, if you put all the small, middle-sized manufacturers together, we hire more than most corporations. Everybody thinks people work for Amazon, right? Right? There are a lot, but if you add all of us up, we blow it away.
Huh. Wow. Well, and for a state, and let's talk city of Chicago, that's always so focused on equity and those opportunities for lower income communities, you're seeing on the shop floors and in many cases being able to move up and get that generational wealth. A lot of that for minority families, many Hispanic families, is happening at your plants. And that's something I think is an untold story of the manufacturing sector, is if you've got, the policymakers in Illinois are really hyper-focused on getting those opportunities for that young African-American family, that young Hispanic family, it's happening at your businesses. That's where those opportunities are happening.
Correct. They get an entry-level job, and they get, they show up on time, and they'll get educated, they'll get trained, they'll get raises, and they'll get upward mobility. And you look at the parts of the state that are having the biggest problems, those are the states that lost manufacturing, the areas of the state. South and west side of Chicago, all those empty factories, that's where the biggest problem is, the crime, the lack of opportunity and hope. We are the number one driver of upward mobility.
Yeah, the people that are management in Simplex right now started in shipping and receiving. Huh. One of the guys was a bike messenger.
Wow.
He's now been with us 28 years. That's where he started.
Wow.
So he didn't know how to build control panels or read a wiring diagram or do any of that. He's now quoting work. And so I can talk about many different people that started at that level and now are doing quality control or project management and quoting.
And they're trained, they're educated, but do they need a college degree?
No.
Absolutely
No,
not.
they
don't need the debt, they don't need the problem. They can come right out, high school with some skills, and they can go into a vocational program where they're working, where they're earning money, and they're getting skills, and they're getting value, and they have a wonderful career. Wonderful career.
I'm so excited. If I looked at Simplex when I bought it in 2008, aging, staff. I now look, I have high school kids that, in the last few years, we've taken people right out of high school. And now we had one that graduated from high school, now going to COD, we're paying the tuition. I mean, that's where these are people, I don't want to go to college. I want to work with my hands. I want to leave the day seeing what I did. And it's really kind of invigorating to see that happening.
It is. We're seeing that all over the place. And those kids, again, they can come from anywhere. It doesn't matter what color they are, where their zip code is. They have an opportunity here.
Well, the American dream is alive on the shop floors of our small to mid-sized manufacturers. And it's really cool to see.
And that's important. We actually have one guy that graduated from high school, worked for us for the summer, went to college, went for a semester and said, this isn't for me, called us back and said, can I come back? And we all welcomed them with open arms.
We hear those stories all the time. It's amazing to see. Let's shift over to trade. I read this week, and you're probably well aware of this, but I'm a newbie. I read this week that for the first time in 20 years, when it comes to the import-export gap, we have imported more from Mexico than China for the first time in 20 years here in the U.S. I know you're big on Buy American, so let's talk trade and let's kind of talk about this a bit. It does seem like there's a shift going on, and one that I think you would probably say is a good thing.
It's a wonderful thing. I'm really delighted, and we can work a lot with Mexico, with Canada, with our partners, and trade is important. But what people need to remember is the United States is the biggest marketplace in the world. by far. And what we need to do is build more of what we consume, produce more of what we consume, and we are seeing that. So these policies have changed. But one big number, I was really pleased to see the trade numbers, but what does still concern me on that is the transshipping through Mexico, through Canada, right? We put tariffs on China, and then the stuff just comes in a different way and under fraudulent paperwork, different names. So there's a lot of that going on still. And I don't know if you know about this de minimis, if you've heard of the de minimis bill. It was supposed to be when you go on a trip and you want to bring some gifts back for your family, you don't want to declare them and pay taxes and tariffs on it. But what happened was the e-commerce model just weaponized that. We raised the de minimis level in the United States to $800, which is pretty sizable now. And so we're seeing, and we're not seeing it in the trade numbers. So Amazon, when you buy something off of Amazon and it comes from China directly to your doorstep, it came in through de minimis. And so that's not being tracked in those trade numbers. So there's a huge hole, billions of dollars. So it's probably actually increased. But I don't want to take away the optimism. But
there are still challenges then.
There are challenges. Well, and de minimis, we finally have people willing to reform de minimis. It's in fact, if Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois would get on the ball, he's like the only guy blocking it right now. So we have Democrats and Republicans out in Washington, D.C. ready to reform the de minimis bill to make it reciprocal. Canada's, I think, at $5. China's at $2. Let's make it reciprocal, and let's make it so it doesn't apply to e-commerce, because that's never what it was intended for. Packages should be inspected, right? These things coming through. This is where the fentanyl is coming through de minimis. All kinds of problems. So we can get at that issue. But I think the bigger point is that we are starting to make more of that which we consume. And Kurt and I would say that's a good thing.
Well, and one thing that's amazing is I hear from TMA's staff as I learn more about manufacturing issues, they've really helped open my eyes to the competition you guys face, because the average business in Illinois faces competition with 3 or 4 businesses down the street. You guys are competing with internationally with manufacturers across the globe, and so when people hear trade issues and hear people like you guys talk about trade, there's a reason why it matters so much, is because you're not just competing with Joe Schmo out of Rockford or Indiana. You're competing with the whole globe.
That's right.
To build on the de minimis, you can take it up a level, right? So if we build a car here and ship it overseas, there's a tariff on it. And it's more than we tariff if they build a car and send it here. How is that fair? Right? So, that's not just China. It's Germany. It's, that's the situation.
The tariff issue is huge. But we have started finally using tariffs again. They're an excellent form. Tariffs and quotas, again, no country in the history of the world went from poor to rich without tariffs, without quotas, without supporting manufacturing, including the United States, South Korea, Germany, Japan. All of them are far more protectionist than we are. So we had President Trump come in. He moved the Overton window, the discussion. We started talking about tariffs again and using them. He applied them to China, and my concern is that things are now going from, either Vietnam or transshipped through Mexico. They're really from China ultimately. So he's talking about the universal tariff now, right? I think that's a phenomenal tool to apply, universal tariffs. We have to build walls to protect ourselves from predation. Kurt can't compete against China. Boeing can't compete against China, right? They're flying their first single-aisle jet right now, and we've heard, Boeing's had a set of issues. Airbus can't compete against China either, though. When price doesn't matter to these companies, when they are funded by a country, how can you compete? So we need to build these walls up, and we need to make our companies into national champions, sell to ourselves to fill that giant marketplace, and then grow to scale and unleash them on the world. Then we'll be the ones exporting again. But we had this fascination about exports and free trade was going to get us there, and it just didn't. It was garbage. And even the International Trade Commission now admits that free trade didn't work so well for anybody, that it made elites and coasts and big companies, but the average worker didn't benefit. Again, those deaths of despair in the Midwest, those loss of jobs.
Well, the conversation has changed dramatically. I just know, I've grown up, I'll use a partisan word, I grew up in Republican politics where free trade was king, and it's taken a long time for TMA to help educate me on the balance that was needed, and it's interesting to see how as my party and as sort of this business aligned sort of right of center interest started to become more worker focused and focused on working families. It has been a change, and it's one of the things that Trump did well for the party was sort of force Republicans to start to think about workers more than just maybe the bigger businesses and think about the small to mid-sized manufacturers instead of just the bigger ones. And now we're starting to do that, and we're realizing that helping those working families helps everyone.
That's right, Collin, because people don't need another cheap pair of shoes or another cheap gadget. They need a good job. And at the end of it, if we do this
You
right,
don't get that quality in America.
you get, well, we can make good shoes in America at a good price too if we can grow to scale. But what you want to do is you want to get, and Republicans are getting it, so are Democrats, understanding that you need good jobs. And that's where it comes down to. And that's where the economists were wrong all these years, pushing free trade. Don't you think? I was in Taiwan last summer and I said to them, how about you put the shoe on the other foot? You drop all your barriers and we export to you. Oh no, that would ruin our economy. Yeah, exactly. They get it, Taiwan gets it, Japan gets it, Germany gets it, every other country got it except us. So thank God we're waking up. You know, we put tariffs on the solar panels. What do? Billions of dollars of investments in American solar manufacturing. We're creating jobs and the price of solar panels continue to decrease. They didn't go up. Hair was on fire, it wasn't real. It was false, so it works.
Huh. You were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing you had talked a little bit about what a small middle-sized business need versus the big ones. Well, the government supports the big companies so much, and what do? They chase cheap labor around the world. That's what they do.
Labor arbitrage.
Right? Because it's all about their stock price, right? We're fighting against that.
Well, you talk about how you mentioned earlier about how these are your family. Like your workers aren't just a number on a piece of paper. It's not just something you could get from any country around the world. They're part of your family. It's a different relationship you have with your workers.
That's right. And we need government paying attention to us, not always supporting the multinationals that are just going to chase that cheap labor to get their stock price where it needs to be.
Yeah. Let's jump to the next thing, because I know we were talking about regulations before, and there was one that you wanted to talk about because the Corporate Transparency Act had went into effect at the beginning of the year, and it's a great example of what we were talking about before, about how and it's requiring specialized assistance and a lot of paperwork to be filed because of this act for pretty much every small business around the whole country. And I know I'm sure, dealing with it as well.
Yeah, it's not hitting the big companies because it's directed. If you look at the underlying thing, and I got to tell you, I'm still trying to understand it. You know, I made a point earlier about trying to run a company. I'm trying to figure out what the heck this thing is.
What is this?
Right? And so what I'm learning about it, they're doing it for it's being done for a good reason. Because there's shells of something out there that are, bringing in.
I have a lot of concern of these Chinese companies, right? These are shells of the CCP.
They're setting up these small companies, and they're bringing in their product, or they're whatever they're doing. So the government wants to be able to figure out who these guys are. Well, that's a valid thing. It's a good thing to do. But think of all of us trying to figure out why do we have to do it? What are we trying to figure out, right? And I spent 2 hours the other day trying to read through it. I reached out to my accounting company, and they said, well, we're not going to take a position. We're not going to do that service. Talk to your lawyer.
Yeesh.
So I'm like, all right, now what do I do?
Yeah.
And that's my point of trying to understand that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great point. And I want to jump right to Zach for our next topic just to keep us moving. But it's a great example of the challenges that government can put in the way. Zach, I know this is something that you opened my eyes to, which is pension funds. Yes. So there are some states, as I did some research after learning about this issue from you, that have been moving to divest their pension funds from China. We found that Illinois has invested $2 billion of our pension funds in China up to 2022. $2 billion of our pension funds have been invested into China. So is this something that Illinois should be looking at to divest our pension funds from a country that does not have our best interests at heart?
That's right. It's not just, it's Illinois, it's in your 401k, it's in everywhere. Vanguard was the leader of these emerging market funds, these exchange traded funds, your money market that's in your 401k. If you have an emerging market fund, you're exposed to China, and so is the state of Illinois. There are states like Tennessee that have excluded China from their funds, and they're performing better. Those funds perform better. We see what's happening in the news with China's stock markets right now and stuff. And the problem is, whether not even performing or not performing, you don't even know what you own. There is no transparency. These A shares and the way it's done, you own shares of a Cayman Island holding company that has a contract to maybe have something in China. It's all up to the Chinese government. They can take it away at a minute. And you're also investing in, so the company that built, we're concerned about instability in the world. What we're doing is we're funding China, who's funding Russia, who's funding Iran, and all this other stuff. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the kind of bad actors that we're giving billions of dollars of our retirement funds. They're engaged in slave slave labor. They're engaged in all kinds of atrocities. The company that built China's first aircraft carrier raised the money on the New York Stock Exchange. It's like unbelievable. and for a while we had federal pensions invested in that. So service members' retirement was funding the aircraft carrier that was pointing the guns right at them. It's just, your mind would blow. But when I tell people about this, they just can't even believe it's true.
Well, we have a treasurer in Illinois, Mike Frericks, who is focused on divesting from different entities.
They want to get out of Russia.
Right.
The governor made a big deal about
getting out of Russia. They've also talked about anyone who's on the hate list. Maybe we don't do business with them, and don't do business with anyone who's anti-Semitic. Which all this sounds good, but I feel like China should probably be added to that discussion.
Absolutely, and I bring it up to them. You know what? They're silent about it, though. It's a real problem. They need to wake up to this.
Interesting. It's certainly something that should be looked at. I know you did some research on this as well.
Yeah, there's actually a bill that was introduced by a group of Republicans in the House last year, HB 2984, I believe it is, and it would do exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
It'd require the state to divest all of its pension funds from China.
It didn't get a lot of traction, though, unfortunately. It's a real problem. And we just saw Governor Pritzker write a $125 million check to a Chinese company to build batteries. He just gave them this money last month. It's unbelievable, in January.
Yeah, definitely a conversation that needs to be opened up. All right, a couple quick topics, then we're going to go to our second section and add in our next special guest. Something that I wanted to go to you on, Kurt, because you brought this up. We've been talking a lot about the migrant crisis because it's not just a Chicago problem, it's a statewide problem at this point. And it's been a big political issue, and we're not covering politics too much today, but I think you guys are kind of on the ground of this in that you need skilled labor, you need labor, and what we hear a lot from these migrants is they don't want a handout. They want to work. Give us a chance to go work and make some money and make something of ourselves. But it's government standing in the way, not letting them do that. And I know you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, I think this is a big deal. There's a lot of talk about immigration, but what could be positive about it could be employees, right? We need employees to do what we're doing. And I will tell you, they're hard workers. Now, are there a few bad actors? There's always a few bad actors everywhere, but everything gets focused on the bad actors. What about all the people that are hardworking, came here for the American dream like everybody else did? Why can't we get them into the workforce? We've got people that need employees, and these would be good employees. So I don't have the answer, but that's where we should be spending time, figuring out how we can make that work.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a whole discussion to be had about, are they here, are some here legally or not legally? Is the process bad? Is this a problem? Is this taking away funding from, Illinoisans who are at need? And there's a lot of good conversation to be had about that. We're hyper-focused on just the one thing you're talking about, which is, if they're here, because they're here, we've got manufacturers who need labor, and we need to start generating some income, some wealth out of this situation, because the more we just keep dumping tax dollars into it, the more this is just a bottomless pit that's never going to solve itself.
Let's take a positive approach rather than all negative, looking at what's all the bad and focus on just the bad things.
Yeah.
What can we do to make it a positive? I think that's one of the things we absolutely can do.
Well, and that's one of the things I know that TMA, through their SAM caucus, which has over 50 bipartisan legislators down in Springfield, which is awesome, they've been pushing on, hey, can we just sit at the table? Because this is what we get. When we get manufacturers at the table instead of, maybe, no disrespect, politicians, you guys are like, all right, let's solve it. Let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. Let's solve the problem and let's move on. Rich knows pretty well, spending a lot of time in Springfield, that's oftentimes not what happens. And we've got a legislator who's joining us in a minute who I'm sure will tell us some of his frustrations. So, getting manufacturers at the table, people who are problem solvers at their heart, who say, all right, let's put these guys to work. I mean, that seems like common sense. I don't know why we need to fight for 6 months and spend hundreds of millions of tax dollars when you guys just solved a big chunk of the problem right there. All right, last thing before we go and take a break and make a shift. Zach, I wanted to ask you about the generic drugs. You opened my eyes to this just today.
I can't believe this. People don't know about this, Collin.
So
It's amazing. It's amazing.
More than 80% of our generic drugs are made overseas, primarily in India, and most of those are sourced from materials from China.
Correct.
There was a research that your organization did, CPA did, looking into the largest drug maker, and they found that 55% of their raw materials came from China. So these generic drugs that we are consuming are majority sourced from China.
These are drugs, when I talk about generics, these are drugs that, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, right? Advil and Tylenol, those are two drugs. They all come from China. They all come from India, active pharmaceuticals through India and China. And when we hear about things that maybe didn't work, somebody died in the hospital and they don't really know, they were older. Well, did they have a drug interaction? A lot of times, our research shows yes, that these drugs either didn't do what they were supposed to, or they were contaminated and had something else in them. And then we talk about the shortages and stuff. There are hundreds of drugs on the shortage list right now that we can't get in America for cancer treatment, for all kinds of things. Again, they're being made overseas. And then you talk about a time of conflict, or like what we saw with COVID, right? Where they started hoarding and cutting us off for themselves. Face masks, gloves, drugs. Do we really want to be dependent on that? And what we're talking about is saving maybe half a penny on a pill. This is, but for these big pharmacy benefit managing companies and these big, conglomerates, they're trying to squeeze money everywhere. But I think there is a value. It's not just price. We need to move beyond the price discussion, look at value, about the security of having that there, the good jobs of having these kind of things here. But it's alarming the percentages, really.
Well, we talk about when it comes to energy, having energy security. Why would we rely on Middle Eastern countries that maybe don't have our best interests at heart? When it comes to, one of the fastest growing industries in the whole country is the medical space, pharmaceuticals, because our population is aging. So you want to talk about national security even, this could fit in that conversation.
And the Indian company that we call out, Audubon, the largest manufacturer, they are operating under hundreds of warning letters from the FDA for things like having urine in the clean room when the FDA inspectors went there. And that's when they went there. We represent American drug manufacturers at CPA who the FDA just shows up and knocks on the door, right? The random show up. What do they do in India and China? They call ahead and schedule it. What do you think happens there? They clean up all the paperwork, they clean up everything, but they apparently forgot the urine on the floor. That's how bad it is. There's metal shavings in vials of sterile medication. This is what's coming over, and you're taking it, I'm taking it, and we don't even know it. We heard about the blood pressure medicine problem contamination. We've heard about the Zantac, the stomach medicine antacid that was contaminated with carcinogens. It's just one after another after another.
Yeah, I talked about this with some of my doctors. I just asked them. They're like, yeah, we're worried about it because we're worried what we're getting is at full potency.
Correct.
Is it really going to work? Think about that. Sure. It used to be, yeah, here's the drug we need to fix you, to take care of your problem. Now the doctors have to go, God, I hope it really works.
And this is not just a federal level, so the FDA really has a lot of blame for this, and there are federal problems. But states give out a lot of money for pills, medicines, and they do a whole bunch of purchases. So when we talk about reimbursement rates, states could be giving a favorable reimbursement rate for domestically manufactured drugs. State could be giving out incentives to start a domestic drug manufacturer there. So the state does have a lot of opportunity to change this metric. And again, we talked about other states that I've gone to and where they're working on this. I would love to see Illinois get on this.
Well, I know there were some things that we could do in Illinois. And speaking of, by the way, drug potency, I know when Rich, wants to take his hair loss supplements, he wants to know that they're actually going to work for him. And I know there's some things we could do in Illinois. We've got a lot of people who watch who make policy in the state. What are some things in Illinois that we could be doing? Zach's mentioned a few to us.
Oh, as far as with the drugs?
Yeah.
Totally. You could, like you mentioned, you could be making it source for Medicaid. Mm-hmm. You could provide tax credits. Mm-hmm. There's just so many different things you could do. You just have to make it a priority.
Correct.
Incentivizing that domestic production. Mm-hmm. All right, you're going to see a quick cut on our, if you're watching this episode, because we're going to shift to part 2 as we add another special guest. So bear with us as you see, we'll see how good our producer can do with the edits here. Okay, we're back. We took a brief intermission because we have a new special guest who's joining our group here in this discussion. He was down in Springfield doing the people's work. Now he's going to be here giving us the latest. We've got State Representative Dan Ugaste. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're in the St. Charles, Geneva area, right? Is where your district is?
I am. Thank you. And thank you for having me today. I am Kane County, primarily 65th District. A little bit of very western DuPage County. Exactly why the district was drawn that way, I have no idea. Won't complain. Great area, that county. A little bit of Wayne's in my district, so I'm happy to represent them as well.
Awesome. Well, we're talking policy and manufacturing, and so it's going to be really helpful to have your perspective. Let's jump into some state policies, some state bills that we've heard about, we've talked about. Rich has been on several smoke-filled rooms over the last year or so talking about the need for BIPA reform. It's been about a year now. Just give us a quick update on why this is so important and why this is hitting businesses and manufacturers as such a problem. And then we'll talk about what might happen this session and maybe fixing this problem.
Sure. This is, we've talked about this numerous times, but this is a bill that goes way back to 2008, Rep. Ugaste is very familiar with it, and he's been working to try and fix it as well. But the problem is this bill has hit so many small business owners in the Chicago metro region.
How many are facing lawsuit? You said before.
There's over 1,300 that we
Oh
looked
my
at
God.
lately, including many TMA members. And it's just horrible because of a ruling that the Supreme Court made about a year ago that said that whenever there's a violation, it gets counted per occurrence, not per person.
Yep. So
that
every
means
time they scan in.
every time you
it's-
scan
it's
in for work.
accumulating. So what was the, we talked about it, and Kurt was kind of teasing me because I made some not so favorable comments about White Castle. But what was White Castle's liability because
White
of this?
Castle's liability was over $17 billion because of that.
Well, and it's funny because even the person who's leading this bill, the Democrat Cunningham who's leading this bill, said that the way it's currently written, he calls it an annihilative liability. Basically annihilates the business, it would cease to exist. So they understand the way it's written right now literally just demolishes business. That's essentially annihilates the business.
Exactly. And actually, Senator Cunningham just introduced a new bill this session that would provide the fix from the per occurrence to the per person, which is great. Keeps the penalty at $1,000. Our concern is it doesn't include any retroactivity clause. So we were trying to get them to include a clause that would take it all the way back and say that, you know, since this bill was put in 2008, you still can only get sued per person. But unfortunately, because that clause isn't in right now, the liability exists until they pass the bill. So everyone who's still under lawsuit right now, those 1,300 small business owners, they're all facing that annihilative liability.
Yeah, I couldn't say the word either, so you and me are similar on that. What are you seeing, Dan, on this? And obviously it's an important issue.
So this is something we've actually have been working on for years, or trying to get done for years, just haven't had much success. The Democrats have not been willing to allow a lot to go forward. Any work that they talked about or they were willing to consider at the time just wasn't really going to take care of the problem at all, and business wasn't interested in it. Hopefully we'll come to something this session. I did see the bill that Senator Cunningham did file. I have not had a chance to speak with him about it yet as to whether or not there may be room for further progress on that bill. I certainly hope there is. You know, even though at that level, without something more, the penalties are still extremely high. Extremely high. And, you know, look, I want everyone's biometric privacy protected as well. Absolutely. I think it's crucial that we do that. But do it in a way that makes sense, that if there is a bad actor, they get penalized, actual harm's done, you take care of it, but you don't just penalize companies solely because you can and someone made a mistake.
Yeah.
So we need retroactivity though too, and that's huge. And basically, if I recall the Supreme Court decision, right, it's been a while since I looked at it, I think they asked the legislature to please address this.
We've never seen that. They literally said, the Supreme Court justice who wrote the opinion said, you guys need to do something about this. Some quick math was done as part of the article that I read, and they said that this bill would change White Castle's liability from $17 billion to $10 to $50 million, which $10 to $50 million is still a pretty hefty price tag and a great payout for the trial attorneys who ran that lawsuit. So it seems like they'll do just fine even if they make this retroactive. So it seems like good policy to make sure we've cleaned up that previous liability too.
There's a number of things that I think would be a good idea to fix, and again, would still allow people to be protected.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's go to the next topic here because estate tax reform is something that's come up a lot. And I really want to ask our manufacturers this because estate tax reform in Illinois has become an issue about farmers. And I get that, it makes sense. We talked about this a couple times on SFRs about how family farms want to pass down to future generations. Well, then the farm gets valued at a certain amount of money and they have to pay that in a tax, in the death tax. And they don't have that kind of money, so now they got to sell off the family farm to pay the death tax or estate tax. So it's understandable why farmers have been sort of the focus of this. And there is a bipartisan bill that's surfaced that Rich will tell us about that looks good on the surface in terms of fixing that problem, but it is specifically only focused towards farmers. So, Rich, give us a quick update on what we're looking at. And then I want to ask Kurt and Zach, is this just a farmer problem, or is the estate tax or death tax just as much of a problem for manufacturers?
Sure. Well, if you recall, Rep. Ugaste, last year, in the end of session, there was some real discussion about true estate tax reform, and they were talking about applying it to all business owners in the state and basically increasing the exemption from 4 million to 12 million, which is the federal exemption right now. So putting it at par with federal. So that didn't get done. The session starts again, but now Illinois is in a very different situation financially. Now, instead of having a surplus, we're starting to face massive deficits now because all the COVID money is gone, and things aren't going as well at the state as they used to. And so suddenly the money isn't there, so they had to cut back. Now the estate tax reform only applies to farmers, and it only goes from 4 million to 6 million. Yep. So increases by 2 million, and only the farmers get it. Which is unfortunate.
It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah,
we're talking about
it's great for the farmers.
It's still half of what the federal exemption is, and it only applies to farmers. So number one, does it go far enough? But real quick, I just want to ask you guys, this conversation in Illinois has morphed to being this is just a problem for farmers, no one else is facing this issue. I kind of struggle to believe that. So I'm just curious, is this something you guys face?
Oh, it's huge. I'm a fourth generation manufacturing business. We've done this a couple of times, and it doesn't get any easier. And with inflation and everything else, values are up. So we shouldn't be decoupled from the federal level, number one. This is another example of having a patchwork of regulations that we're subject to in Illinois. Businesses can vote with their feet. We don't have to stay here. And so, again, you talked about the budget problem in Illinois. You're not going to solve it with the death tax on everybody, on anybody. It doesn't matter. There's not enough of it. That's not the solution to the problem. And in fact, what it's going to do is cause more and more people to leave, businesses to leave, family farms to sell out. It's just not the way to solve the problem.
Well, and you talk about a family farm might struggle to leave because it's land-based, whereas you're manufacturing, if you're nearing the end of when you're going to run it, you want to pass it down to your kids, that's a pretty big incentive to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to pass it down in a couple of years, so let's move out of state before the death tax in Illinois is going to whack you. That's a big incentive for businesses, manufacturers to leave, and unlike farmers, they can leave.
Correct. We can take our assets and we can take our business and our jobs and go somewhere else. And that's what you're seeing happen. It's just one more negative cost here, negative thing in Illinois. And the farmers, while they can't take their land, they sell.
Yeah.
They sell it out to a big corporation, and believe me, they don't treat their workers the same way as the family business, etc.
Yeah, even though we can do that, that's not what we want to do.
No.
Our employees are very important to us, right?
Correct.
And yes, there's other employees, I get it, but not these people that have invested a lot of years working for us. And we want to support them. We don't want to leave.
And so what kind of thank you do we get at the end, right? A big tax, right? You've built a business, you've been successful. We should be encouraging this and getting rid of all taxes on these things. Tax the things you don't want, not the things you do.
Well, at the end of the day, it's also a double tax because you built that company up with taxed dollars. These dollars have been taxed, and in Illinois probably taxed 2 or 3 times, let's be honest. And now at the end, let's just throw one final tax on top of it as you're passing on to your great beyond.
Exactly.
Representative Ugaste, I'm just curious what you're hearing on this and kind of what your thoughts are in general.
So for right now, this is the bill we're going to see, and it's getting bipartisan support. I will be supporting it because, unfortunately, as part of the super minority in both chambers, with the governor being the same party as both super majorities, you take what you can get. Yep. And this is something we could get, and we're going to take it to help the family farmers who have property that they will be passing along that's under $6 million. However, it doesn't mean we should stop there. It doesn't mean that's the answer to the problem, and we will keep working towards and pushing for the solution, which is coupling it with the federal level and making it apply to everybody. Because whether you're manufacturer, farmer, or just own assets and that you've built some other way, you should have the same exemption as everybody else.
That's right. It's definitely common sense.
Right.
Rich, let's talk about it. We got another bill here let's talk about, which is another bipartisan bill promoting manufacturing internships in Illinois. They tried to push it last year. It stalled. Looks like they're going to try it again. There's a Senate bill here that they're trying it again, pushing to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to do manufacturing internships for credit, for school credit. What's going on with this? Sounds like it could be a good bill.
Yeah, so this is actually a bill that came out of the Senate, and it actually passed the Senate last year unanimously. It's 57-0. As you said, it was a bill that allows employers, manufacturers to bring in 16 and 17-year-olds to work at their plant and use certain tools. Right now they can't do that because of child labor laws. So it did, it started in the House. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Ugaste, but it didn't get a hearing or anything, and then it came back and was re-referred back to Rules Committee, and lo and behold, we just found out it's been gutted and it's now a shell bill. And so you've had experience with that before. You know what we're talking
I
about.
have, yeah. I far too much. It usually is something you've never seen before. It's thrown at you last minute, and here it is.
Like how I still can't get over the fact that last year's budget implementation bill wasn't it like the soybean bill or something because they had gutted the previous bill.
They never read the way they are on the board. I mean, it's always completely different at the end of the year. It's something new. So no, this is something we need. We need our businesses need it. Our students need it. This will train them. This will allow them to go into places, learn a skill, and be able to do something upon graduation from high school if college isn't what they want to pursue. Or even if it is, this gives them some added training, learning how to work before they get to college level. Go get the training they need then for the job that they could get or have seen in the facilities you've allowed them to work in and advance themselves. It just makes sense for everybody. And these businesses, I've represented businesses for 30 years in my legal career before going down to the House. You know what? They're going to take care of their employees. They're going to make sure these kids stay safe. No one wants an injured worker. It just costs them, and costs them in ways they don't ever want to experience in Illinois. So it's a great idea. My hope is we'll do something and get it going through the House. I know TMA is pushing a lot of good bills, and hopefully we'll get things moving again.
Yeah, you think about even a lot of Illinois school districts in their schools are starting to bring in a lot of CTE, career and technical education, to learn these skills because they're recognizing there are different pathways depending on where you want to go in the future. So it makes sense to give these kids these hands-on opportunities. Don't just learn it in a classroom. Go to a local manufacturer and get that chance to see it, to touch it, to feel it.
Yeah, I want to give a real experience about Simplex in that. We've got people that we've hired, younger individuals that want to go to college but can't afford it yet. They're saving, they're doing whatever they can, but they want to be engineers. By working at Simplex, we're exposing them to what electrical engineers do, right? They're reading drawings that electrical engineers make. So they're getting real exposure to what they might be doing. So, they're getting, while they can't go to college right now, they're trying to figure out, is this what I want to do?
And it's huge for that development. I mean, we're seeing a lot of schools go into with their STEM or STEAM spaces. It's hands-on learning. That's exactly what they're going to get in a situation like this. That's huge for their development. So it seems like a bipartisan, a great common sense thing, which is why Springfield's probably going to screw it up, right? Sorry, Representative.
Well, we're hoping to bring it back in a different vehicle, but it seems like at least this bill has been corrupted, so co-opted.
We'll keep an eye on it. TMA will keep an eye on it, and we'll let all their members know what's going on with it for sure. All right, let's go to another bill. This one actually has been put forward by two different SAM caucus members who are pushing this bill. So it's a modernization of the R&D, the Research and Development Tax Credit, and a permanent extension to it. So for those who don't know how Springfield works, they like to use sunsets.
Is there somebody that does know how it works?
Well, fair. Yes. They love their sunsets. If they can put a sunset on a bill, what that means is that whenever that bill is going to sunset, now you have to come down and renegotiate, which means you have to give them more things to get what you want. So when it's permanent, they don't get to negotiate with you again. So they love their sunsets. So if you've been around in Illinois for more than 5 minutes, you've heard about this R&D tax credit and how it needs to be extended because they keep just bumping it. Like, oh, okay, we negotiated a 2-year extension or a 5-year extension. So this bill would permanently extend it because everyone says we know we need this. Let's stop playing games and just make it permanent, especially because for many businesses, they can't plan on a 2-year or a 5-year tax credit. They need to know a lot of this R&D work doesn't happen in 6 months or 12 months. They need the long-term planability.
Well, look what happened at the federal level last year about R&D credits and that type of stuff. It was a nightmare for many companies. There's now, it's being addressed, but a lot of companies took a big hit last year having to deal with the expiration of R&D credits.
And this is one where big businesses and small businesses come together on these issues. We're all affected by it. We want certainty. We want to be able to plan. We want to know where we're going to be and make a plan and execute on it. But this kind of stuff, all this does is benefit the lobbyists, benefit the campaign donation. It's just a bunch of activity that doesn't create any value, in my opinion.
Oh, and they can plop it on a taxpayer-paid mailer to say, look, we did something for our local businesses and manufacturers. manufacturers. And yeah. So Rich, give us a little bit of the background here.
Well, yeah, this is a bill that was introduced last year by a group of Republicans, and it comes up all the time. I think the current one is supposed to sunset in 2027, something like that. And so, it's just making it permanent. It's extending it. I mean, R&D tax credit is great. I mean, you guys know what you use it for. I mean, it creates jobs, it creates innovation, creates more tax revenue for the state. I mean, it only makes sense. But it's always a political football because I think they just see this as something they can use, as a at the end of session whenever they need to add something in here and there. Unfortunately, it's not a priority, and so, we're hopeful, but.
So I'm not quite certain which bill it is you're talking about, which bill numbers, or because oftentimes there are many versions of similar bill numbers. I can tell you.
This one, just in case it helps, maybe it doesn't because you're live now, but Senator DeWitt and Representative Sosnowski each are carrying the bills in the two houses.
Okay, and Senator, and I believe the bill, though, would also change the amount of credit needed or the amount of increase needed in the research and development costs so that it's more attainable.
Basing on over 50% instead of basing it on 100%.
Right,
so
okay.
you're right.
I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same bill.
Yeah, it would modernize it as well.
Great bills that would help. It's early in the session. Senator DeWitt's my senator. I'll be working with him, trying to help him out. I know Representative Sosnowski very well, strong business advocate. See what we can get done. Hopefully it's something we can push forward. The manufacturers of the state, big and small, need it. There's no reason not to do it, and there is absolutely zero reason to have sunsets. If there are problems with bills in the future, if it's causing an issue, that's what new General Assemblies are for. They can then change the law and address the issue that's occurring at the time. Until then, there's no need for a sunset. So hopefully we'll get this done for businesses in Illinois. Leader McCombie, when she came in, and it's just this past year, she had to start a number of working groups. She asked me to lead the one that's geared towards business in the state of Illinois. We promote a number of bills that we have that will help businesses both grow in Illinois as well as trying to attract new businesses to Illinois. We're still working on it. Unfortunately, many of the bills we have identified have not been called to hearing yet, but we'll keep working on it.
Yeah, my producer hates this, but I'm the guy with the microphone, so I can throw us off agenda. I want to throw a new topic in here and just ask you, how difficult is it? Coming from your perspective, you've dealt with businesses, manufacturers like our two experts here today. You go down there with common sense bills, but being in the super minority, sometimes it's a struggle to get people to listen even to common sense. How much of a struggle is that for you?
It's almost unimaginable. You would think that being able to go down and talk to people and reason with them and just show them the logic of a situation and how it would benefit everybody would be something, or the vast majority of Illinoisans, be something they would want to consider. And it's just not the case. There are special interest groups that really have control over what's getting heard, what's being done within Illinois, and it's something that it certainly isn't being done to the benefit of the state. Give you a perfect example. I had 30 to 35 bills filed last year. I got 0 hearings in committee on any of mine. A lot of them deal with workers' compensation reforms, lower taxation, things designed to help people. And the work comp reform, it's going to keep all our employees safe. It's going to make certain they get good medical care. It's not going to end up putting them on state, the state dime to have to take care of them while they're recovering. It just lowers the cost for business, so we're more competitive as a state and would allow us to do more things, allow businesses to expand, pay their people more, and cause more businesses to look at Illinois when they're looking at where they want to locate. Because we have a lot going for us. We just can't get out of our own way in state government.
Well, we can cut this section if you tell me no, Zach, but you were telling me a story about how it was different in Arizona and how it's completely different to what we deal with in Illinois. Are you willing to share that?
No, I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to ask, Representative, I imagine you probably read your own bills, don't you?
Yes.
I imagined you did, but I'm surprised. As we've talked about, we kind of joked a little bit about these shell bills and these things that come out in the middle of the night and they get voted on. I was down in Arizona and working on a couple of bills with the state Senate and I've been in some other states working on bills on these Made in America issues. And the representatives, they're not only writing the bill themselves, they're reading it, we're going through it, they know what they're voting on. And I just think in Illinois, my experience is that it's very much the opposite. They don't even know what they're voting on. You don't even hear about it until afterwards. And again, I know there's a lot of good people like yourself who are just the opposite, but we see too much of that in the majority here, and these special interests running it. And again, your bill's not even getting a hearing. If it's a bad idea, fine, let it be heard, let it be voted on, let it be voted down. But the fact that they won't even call the hearing on it, it's just so perverse in this state. It's so unusual.
And people don't realize that. They think government, they think of the old cartoon, how a bill becomes a law. We should make, I don't know if we know any animators. My wife Abby is really creative. Maybe we can make our own little, how a bill becomes law in Illinois, because it'd be.
It's 3 people in a dark room. That's how it is. That's how it is.
It's just not what people think is common sense, and you deal with it obviously on a daily basis. And
I feel for you.
Yeah, it's just interesting because Zach was just telling me earlier about it. Dealing with other states, how they're writing their own bills, they're making changes, they're sitting at the table with the stakeholders saying, "Would this work? Oh, it wouldn't. Okay, then how can we make it work over here?" Like, it's collaboration, it's common sense,
and there's politics in those states too. There's D's and R's, and but they can still somehow at least give each other some airtime and let the good ideas bubble to the top. In Illinois, it's become so perverse.
In all honesty, the best idea would just be for both sides to work together and come out with the best bills for the people of the state of Illinois. We don't need it all one way or the other. It needs to be done in a collaborative way. That's what's made this a great state, and what would keep us being a great state going forward if we would only do that again.
Yeah, and there was a time, it wasn't that long ago, that's even how this state was operated, whether it was a Republican in the governor's mansion or a Democrat in the governor's mansion, or during that small period of time where Republicans led the legislature, there was a lot more of that bipartisanship, and those times are mostly done, though I know you're fighting for it.
Always, we'll keep working at it.
All right, we'll go back on the agenda before my producer screams at me. Let's go to our next topic here. Rich, I want to toss it to you because we talked a little bit about CTE education. Another bill by a member of TMA's SAM caucus, which has been brought up, which sounds great to me, is allowing schools to offer CTE, 2 years of CTE education, instead of foreign language requirements. Not saying you have to do one or the other, but giving the option to kids who say, you know what, instead of 2 years of foreign language, that's not a path I'm going to take. I'd rather take 2 years of career and technical education. There's a bill right now that's been filed in the House that would allow that to happen.
Yeah, and again, it's been filed and it really hasn't gone anywhere. But it sounds like a great issue. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Ugaste.
Yeah, Amy Elick and Katie Stewart have pulled it forward, HB 3307. So it's a newer bill, newer discussion, but it's just from reading it, sounds like it's a good starting point for a common sense conversation.
I've heard a bit about it, and I know they are trying to talk and start working with others on getting it to advance and move forward. Exactly where it is, I have not talked to anyone yet, but we've only been down there 2 weeks so far this year, and we'll be going back in another 2 weeks, and maybe we'll get a little more movement at that time, so hopefully.
Yeah, and my company works with a number of school districts, and there's a lot of districts that offer, the foreign language learning, and they're now starting to offer the CTE. And I think what I hear a lot from these districts is they just don't want mandates from Springfield. Let us decide, with our boards and our administration and our parents, let us decide what's best for our kids. And so this bill, just on the surface, seems like it's moving in that direction. We're not going to force you to do 2 years of foreign language. Maybe for you want to offer CTE. Maybe Barrington offering 2 years of foreign language or 4 years of foreign language works for them, but maybe your district wants to go another direction. That obviously is something that school districts are crying out for, and again, letting local communities make decisions for their schools seems to be common sense.
Yeah, and the best thing about this is it doesn't cost anything, because we're a lot of the challenges we've been having with bills is because of the current fiscal situation with the state, and if you're going to do something that's going to cost money, then you're dealing with all these other costs that they're dealing with. But this is a great bill. It just gives you flexibility in determining what you want to do. Do you want to take foreign language? Do you want to do CTE? So it makes sense.
And we talk about, you guys are one of the biggest problems that we hear from TMA's members and from manufacturers everywhere is the lack of skilled workers, the worker shortage, and any kind of bill that could help make progress in that path. These schools being able to provide some of this education, there's a lead time to that. You're not going to see those employees tomorrow, but we've got to think long term, and this is the biggest challenge facing our manufacturers is the lack of skilled labor. So it seems like the more we can do in this space, the more it's going to help our manufacturers.
I actually commented on this earlier. I said, when we said we weren't going to manufacture anymore in the U.S., we were going to be a service economy, we forgot a whole group of people that like to work with their hands and like to make things, right? They're still here.
Yep.
They're in school. We're telling them, we're not giving them any paths. We're not giving them options. Go to college, get a big debt. I mean, this goes to their way. They're waiting to have help like that.
Yeah.
Yep, we could hire 20 people if I had them tomorrow, and I could take my employment from 70 to 90. The demand is there, and the people that we do have, they're enjoying a heck of a lot of overtime. But at some point, people want to rest, right? You're going to burn them out. So I'm so blessed and fortunate to have this great team. But we need some balance, and a lot of the bills we talked about. We have our first 18-year-old we just hired. This kid, straight A student. This kid was in honors classes in high school, but he doesn't want to go to college. Not that kind of college, So we're going to set him up with some vocational classes at the community college. We're going to pay for it, but he wanted to start sooner. He just turned 18, so we could finally hire him. He's starting next week, but he wanted to start when he was 17, and he's the kind of student that would have not taken the foreign language and would have taken those CTE classes. So it's about giving choices and options. I think that's wonderful. I hope we see these move forward.
I think we have to wake up a lot of people in the state of Illinois to realize this, and I was one of them 15 years ago. I was very naive as to what was going on until I got into manufacturing. My eyes have been opened, and we're hiring kids every day, or we have people coming from high school, just to get exposed to it, and their eyes light up. And I'm like, sorry, that wasn't me when I was in high school. I was going to college, but that doesn't mean everybody is. But it is so cool to see their eyes light up when they can do something and they learn something and they're working with their hands. It's amazing.
It's very rewarding, and it's not a second-class path. These are equal paths, they're just different. And other countries like Germany and other places, they put a value on vocational education again. And I'm so glad, again, a lot of talk about it, but let's put some action behind it too, because these are the careers of the future. And if we want to have a safe, strong, secure nation that makes things, we need these great workers.
A lot of the owners of these small, middle-sized businesses didn't come out of college.
That's right.
Yeah, listen, I didn't get a chance to go to college, so, and I tried to make something of myself. So there's a lot of people with that kind of story of, for whatever reason, maybe you don't have that opportunity or you don't want to take that path. I mean, I was that 18-year-old kid who I had a job at 13. Give me that. Don't make me take more schooling. I want a job. So, yeah, I mean, the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work for
and it doesn't
a diverse
preclude
economy.
It doesn't preclude you from a six-figure job or whatever it is. You can be up there at the top. You can make unlimited earning potential in manufacturing. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
All right, I want to close on this. We had another topic that I don't think quite covers into manufacturing. So unless Rich jumps on me and says we got to talk about tipped wages, we'll save that for next week. For this week, I just want to close on this. What I love to see is a bit of a shift. So Representative Ugaste, I'll ask you first, because it seemed like to me for the longest time, for manufacturers, for business-aligned people, we would just hear each year, okay, we went down to Springfield and we killed 3 bad bills, but 4 snuck through. And the next year we killed a couple bad bills, but a couple more snuck through. I'm really excited to hear that there's actually a movement, a push, whether it's through the SAM caucus and TMA, whether it's through representatives and leaders like you, to say, okay, it's not just stopping bad bills. What things could we put forward that we could vote yes on? That's a more positive approach, and it does seem like it's fairly new. It's newish to the last couple of years, and now maybe those bills won't get a hearing, but I do like to see that positive momentum. And I'm just curious if you're seeing more of that, of not just stopping the bad bills, but what could we do to innovate and take our state and our economy to that next level?
So what we can do is elect more people who think in the way that, what we need is business. It's not all, it's not just companies trying to take advantage of people. That is such an old school way of thinking, and it just really doesn't exist anymore. There are probably a few bad actors out there somewhere, but we have laws on the books to take care of that already. What we need are people going to Springfield to try and come up with ways to actually help our economy grow, which will in turn help the citizens of the state of Illinois, help the residents. That's the key. We need to get the right people elected. It had been a while, I think, since any bills like that had passed, and it was starting to be considered if we could just kill bills, that's the path for us. We know we need to get things done. We know things have to change. We now have a long history of looking at Illinois and saying, okay, even if we are growing, even if we are improving, and somehow we get disagreement on the sides over numbers. Numbers you would think would be something we could all quantify and say either we're growing or we're not growing, but there's some disagreement there. But even if we take the most optimistic numbers that the other side throws out, we're not growing at the rate we should. We're Illinois. We are the manufacturing giant of the nation still, I think. You know, we're the transportation hub of the nation. We have some of the best educated workers in the entire nation.
Some of the hardest workers.
The hardest workers in the entire nation. People who are willing to take the overtime when it's offered to them. Not every part of the country is like that. And yet we have one thing in our way, government. And we need to get out of the way. We're pushing bills. More people are pushing bills every year. They're filing new bills every year to try and get this done. I think we've turned a corner. It's just a matter of getting everything moving in the right direction again.
And I love what you say about getting people's perceptions to understand the difference. It's not the large corporations where the CEO is taking a pay cut to make sure their employees are paid. During COVID, it was our small businesses who were saying, I'm going to take less or take nothing so that my employees can make it through COVID. I mean, you see that at the small businesses. You don't see that at the large corporations. So there is a significant difference between the two. And it's people like Kurt and Zach and others who are the ones who are taking care of their employees and giving them those opportunities. It's different than the big, huge corporations.
Well, the small businesses generally tend to be the innovators too. They're the ones that first try out the family daycare in their own facilities. I mean, I can't tell you the number of innovations I'm seeing out of, in small manufacturers it usually is too. Within my own district, I was meeting with one and she's telling me how she is actually going into the grade schools in the area and providing them with materials that will lead them to start thinking about what a career in manufacturing might be like, engineering might be like, how, you know, what things that she needs in her business to get kids start thinking about it younger, and not everything has to be a career path in an office somewhere.
Yeah. And Representative, you probably get this, but I hear this all the time, you know, all these corporate fat cats, you know, you're making money. Look, Kurt and I were talking before this started that when our business has bad years, where does the money come from? Comes from you, right? Or if you borrow it from the bank, whose house is on the line, right? So if you took a risk and you did well, shouldn't you enjoy a reward? That's how it's supposed to work here. That's how we're supposed to incentivize that thing. We shouldn't villainize people making money and doing a good job taking a risk and stuff. But you know, I think people don't understand that they don't realize that it's our homes on the line, our families, our personal wealth that we're gambling, betting in a smart way, hopefully, in an educated bet every day.
You're leveraging your entire lives. Everything goes bad, you're on the street.
I'm the one that's out.
It's not, I'll go find the next job. Like,
and so shouldn't I get a reward if I did well? And shouldn't my workers do well and get raises if we do that? And so I think, you know, if we could go down to Springfield and tell the other side, just get that through, that we're not all just, you know.
There's a way, the rising tide lifts all boats. There's a way for all of us to win instead of picking winners and losers.
This is a little bragging, so I'll acknowledge it right now. But, you know, my wife and I bought the company in 2008. Anybody remember what was happening in 2009?
Bad economy.
We didn't have enough work to keep everybody working. We didn't lay off a single person.
Wow.
We said, if you want to work 40 hours, we'll pay you for it.
That's right.
If you want to go home early, go home early. That's okay. But if you need the 40 hours, we'll pay it for you. Just sit at your space, you know, read a book or something like that. But we're going to need you when we get through this.
Right.
And we did.
Yeah, those are the stories you hear all the time, and I think through the work of good legislators, good manufacturers, TMA, and pushing these stories out, hopefully we can get more eyes on that. Rich mentioned having a lawmaker go through a plant. TMA is doing this a lot, where they're bringing lawmakers in to see it and talk to the workers and see the facilities. I remember one time we did this. This was 4 or 5 years ago. We did this with a lawmaker who had gotten office as a progressive anti-business candidate. And she came through and she walked through just one plant. And the next week she went down and voted yes on a pro-manufacturing bill because she's like, I didn't realize. Didn't know this world existed. And I think we make this assumption that lawmakers go down there and they know, all the different challenges, but in many cases they've never seen it. They don't know that these exist. So I know there's a lot of entities out there working hard to bring these to the forefront. And the group that's co-sponsoring today's event, TMA, is really pushing hard on that. So stay informed and stay on top of that, because I think we're going to see positivity start to move forward. All right, closing thoughts. Let's end on an air of positivity. I'll make you go first, Rich. Closing thoughts on this discussion of manufacturing in Illinois and America. Where can you see this grow? What's positive you can see that could come from the work being done in today's discussion?
Well, I think the positivity is these two guys right here and what they represent. I mean, we've had an incredible discussion.
I like you looked over at Kurt and Dan, not Zach. I want to make sure.
Well, I'm going to give Rip Ugaste some credit too. I mean, he is the chair of the House Sam Caucus. So he's heavily involved. He's been a good friend to TMA. He knows what he's doing. But these two guys, every time I listen to them, I just get energized because you think about what they've done with their companies, how they've built them, and how they care about their employees. And it just really, gives you hope for the future.
Kurt, what's your final thoughts for today?
I am just glad to be in manufacturing now. Like I said, I was in corporate America for 24 years. I was naive, no exposure. I now understand the importance. And I understand why it is so important to keep these companies. Simplex has been around for 52 years. My goal is to have it around for at least another 52 years.
I love that. That's awesome. Representative.
So, manufacturing is the business to be in the state of Illinois or anywhere. And I'm glad we have so much of it here in Illinois. I'm sad at how much we've lost, but the opportunity is still out there. You have a manufacturer in your area, you're going to have so many service industries and other manufacturers who need to supply the one manufacturer that's already there. This is it's a business model that builds on itself. It provides for whole communities. It provides so much to everybody. We need to keep it going. And I will tell you this, and I don't mean to insert any negativity, but I don't believe in lying to people. Illinois has its share of problems. We have our share of challenges. I wouldn't have gone to Springfield if I wasn't optimistic that we have and can still have a brighter future ahead, make this work, and then people will again see incredible growth here in the state of Illinois, especially in the manufacturing sector.
I love it. Zach.
I look out at the future. It's so bright. I need sunglasses, right? I got to wear shades. So it is a great opportunity, I think, for manufacturers. But like the representative says, it's the choices that we're going to make. Where is that opportunity going to be made?
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's here in Illinois. I want it here in Illinois. We have the momentum.
Well, and as was mentioned, we have every advantage in this state. There's no reason when I hear these reports come out of the administration right now of we had a slight uptick in growth. And there's some questions if those numbers are even fully accurate. That said, why are we okay with a slight uptick in growth? This state should not have a slight uptick. We have every benefit, every advantage. We should be blowing the Midwest, let alone the country, out.
Right.
And we're happy with crumbs, and I'm sick and tired of being happy with crumbs. So we can do better. If people like this are at the table, I know we're going to do better. All right, some closing business. First, I want to say thank you to TMA, organization that we've partnered with for today's episode. TMAIllinois.org. Check them out. They represent small to mid-sized manufacturers. They've got the SAM Caucus down in Springfield with bipartisan legislators fighting for small to mid-sized businesses, but especially manufacturers down in Springfield. So thank you to TMA. Do you want to, I know for CPA, you want to give their website for people to check them
that's
out?
ProsperousAmerica.org, and it's the Coalition for Prosperous America.
Perfect. Thank you to our watchers. Thank you to our producer, Lane Davis. Our assistant producer, Ryan Kilduff, is at the hospital right now for the birth of their second child. So good luck, Ryan. I hope Megan's doing well. Thank you to our watchers. And for everyone who participated, we'll be back with a special Valentine's episode next week.